Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Senior Solutions Agency Friday call. My name's Joe Johnson. I've got my co-host on, Michael Mahalik. We got a great show lined up for you. Today we're gonna hop right into it. I really don't have any announcements to make. Michael, unless you have anything you want to share, any announcements or any words of encouragement?
Joe, I say the same thing, everything all the time. And now that I've been on this earth a little more than half a century, so have you. Life, a lot is about being at the right place at the right time. But being at the right place at the right time is not enough, Joe. You then have to take advantage of being at the right place at the right time. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're here for a reason on this call today. You're with the #1 finance coach in the country, Mr. Joe Johnson, and you're in the #1 industry, the #1 avenue of insurance in the country, final expense. So, please take advantage of this opportunity. And again, as we always say, you're not by yourself. Even though you're an independent contractor, Senior Solutions will be with you every step of the way. Do you believe in investing in yourself? I promise we're going to believe in investing in yourself double, if not triple more. So excited to be here and so excited about the opportunity everybody on this phone has today.
Yeah, very well said. Absolutely, Michael. Thank you very much. Guys, as you can see on the screen, if you're on the webinar, today's topic is the final expense flip chart presentation. And the reason why we wanted to cover the flip chart, well, one of the reasons is because I had at least one, if not more than one agent this week reach out to me and was just asking for a little bit of additional coaching on the flip chart and like how do you do it and what, how do you transition into doing it. So that's exactly what we're going to be covering. We've done videos on this before. You can certainly go back and you can archive over the last 5-6 years, and you can see what the flip chart presentation is all about. I can tell you this, it really hasn't changed, but it's always good to kind of refresh and, go over just to make sure that we're doing everything properly. And that's really the purpose of this call, just to make sure that, hey, we are on track. Let's make sure that we're getting back to the basics. It's like football. It's blocking and tackling. And that's what we're doing when we do our in-home presentation, man, just to make sure that we don't get relaxed and complacent and we start skipping steps. One thing I will tell you is that there is a, and what I'll do is I'll leave it in the description of the video. So if I know this is a live webinar, but maybe you're watching this on YouTube. I will leave, if you go to the description of the video, what I'll do is I'll leave a link to a video that we did probably about 2 years ago, I want to say, and it's called the in-home presentation A to Z, and it's lengthy. I mean, it's an hour and a half long at least, but man, it really goes into detail, the full in-home presentation, and really goes into a lot of the little nuances about the in-home presentation, why we do everything we do, why we take all the steps that we take. And I know part of that is covering the flip chart. But today, so you don't have to watch an entire hour and a half video, if you just want to get practice on the flip chart presentation, that's exactly what we're going to be covering today. Now, what you see on the screen, this is actually just it's a screenshot I took with my camera of what the Senior Solutions flip chart looks like if you're using the paper version. I thought I had one here. Hang on one second. Let me grab it. Okay. All right. I'm back. Now, if you're watching this, if you're watching the video, this is what it looks like. It's as you can see, it's in a it looks like a little spiral notebook, basically. It's very thin. There's only about 5 or 6 pages to it if you go through, including the cover sheet. So it's very thin. It's very easy to fit into your little sales portfolio if you're seeing clients face to face. I recommend the paper version. Now, you could also do this on your laptop. You could also do it, if you're using a tablet, you can have the PowerPoint on the tablet, which is nice too. I don't know. The thing about the paper version, because it doesn't take up a lot of room, it's in writing. It's easy, when you're with your clients, it's easy just to kind of, hold it in your lap or have it right there and show it to them and kind of flip. So it's not a bad idea to have it on your computer screen or tablet, but I certainly recommend using the paper version as well. Now, we use every single page. So the cover sheet that you see with Senior Solutions and all the carriers, that's not just a cover page. That's something that we actually want to get into, and that's actually the beginning of how you do the flip chart. Now, very important. The flip chart presentation is probably one of the most important parts of your presentation because it does kind of set everything up. But prior to getting into the flip chart presentation, you've got to make sure that you do the pre-sale folder before you get into the flip chart, because the pre-sale folder really is the perfect transition, being able to bond and rapport, do some fact finding, asking questions about if they've done any pre-planning. Besides pre-planning, do they have any life insurance policies in place? The pre-sale folder also gives you an opportunity to do a free review if they do have insurance, so you can get into it. So make sure that you do a proper pre-sale folder presentation before you do that. And then how you kind of transition. This is what by the way, if you, I know this isn't full screen, but this is what the pre-sale folder looks like. So make sure you're using that. Once you go from the pre-sale folder, kind of the transition, Michael, from the pre-sale to this is, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, let me explain to you how all the guarantees of these state regulated plans work. And that's where you pull out your little, your flip chart to do it. Now you can see that on the screen. I'm also going to do it like a live version of it as well. I'll kind of have it on here. And what I'll actually say to the client is, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I think I already mentioned this before, but it's really important for you to know that I don't work for an insurance company. Senior Solutions, our agency, we're a state licensed agency. And what's great about that gives us the ability to shop around all the different state regulated plans to find the program that's going to be the best fit for you. And Mr. and Mrs. Client, one thing that you can feel good about is regardless of what company is going to offer you the biggest discounts, every company that we use is a highly rated company. So two things about what I just said. One is I let them know I don't work for an insurance company. I'm also alluding to the fact that we're going to shop around, and they're already seeing some of the companies that we do business with, and we're assuming that they already are recognizing some of the names, maybe like CVS Health, Mutual of Omaha, Transamerica, AIG. Obviously, those are some of the big ones that stand out. And Michael, the other thing that I'm doing is I'm making the point of, regardless of what company that we choose, that it's going to be a highly rated company.
That's huge. That's huge. So that's exactly what our clients are looking for. A top-rated company.
Yeah,
exactly. Most amount of coverage.
We don't want them to, you don't want to necessarily, you don't want your clients to be tied in to like one company necessarily, because you want to be able to have the flexibility to quote them the company that's going to be the best fit, because you do want to get them the best deal, because you don't want your policy to get replaced.
Joe, that's the power of Senior Solutions, that here we represent the best interest of the clients and not the best interest of an insurance company. And that's what makes Senior Solutions so powerful.
And you know what, Michael, to that point, you should really stress that point before you get into the flip chart, and you're stating the fact that you don't work for an insurance company, that your interests are with the client, that you're not married to any of these companies, that you're putting the client's interest first to make sure that they get the best deal possible. So make sure you don't skip the cover sheet. You kind of tell a little bit of story on the cover sheet. Now you're going to flip to the first page, and you're going to be talking about what are final expenses. And you just, two things you can do. You can either ad lib, or if you want, you can simply just read exactly what is on the flip chart. That's the beauty of using the flip chart, is that everything's already kind of written out for you. Now, me, I like to tell stories a little bit. I like to engage with the client and not sound like I'm reading. So kind of like what I'll do is, Mr. and Mrs. Client, as you probably are aware of, final expenses, unfortunately, when we pass away, the first thing that we do is we leave a financial burden to our loved ones, whether it's going to be something, extravagant, like a big funeral that can cost anywhere from, $15,000 to $20,000, or if it's just going to be a small gathering of a few people and, maybe something simple like a cremation. But at the end of the day, when we pass away, final expenses, that's the bill that we're leaving to our loved ones that they have to pay. And funeral costs can be anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for a traditional funeral. As you can see, the National Funeral Directors Association estimated back in 2011, it was $9,688. You can read it right off of there. And that's before you pay for a plot, the vault, and all the extras like obituaries and limos. And we add up all those costs, that can easily be $10,000 to $15,000. And just to tell you, that's why more and more people are leaning more towards cremation than a traditional type of a funeral. So that's what our final expenses. You're going to transition to the next page. You're just going to flip it over. Why most people are requesting coverage. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I've been doing this for quite a long time. And I know the reason why that you mailed in that card in the first place is because that you didn't want to leave your family with a financial burden, as you mentioned. But in addition to that, there's usually three reasons why people mail that card in. One is that they don't have any protection in place, and they're worried about leaving that large bill to their family. Number two is that they have some protection in place. Maybe they have a small policy they took out a long time ago, or maybe they have a traditional type of life insurance, and they just feel like they could use a little bit more. And then lastly is that they really have plenty of coverage, but they still want to leave a special benefit for a special person, like a child, grandchild, favorite charity, or maybe their church. But Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you tell me which one of these best applies to you. And then they're going to tell you which one. Now, if you did a good job with the pre-sale folder, and you did a good job with the fact finding, you probably already know that they don't have any coverage in place, or maybe they have some coverage. Okay, so with this, what's great about this is, one is if you kind of forgot to do that with the pre-sale, now you're doing it now, and you're really kind of digging into the emotional side. Because what you're doing with this flip chart, when you're asking questions about pre-planning and why they requested the information and why they requested why they're interested in getting coverage, is that you're digging into those emotional cues, and you want them to respond. You want them to talk about why it's important that they don't leave that in. So this is all these pages are important to the flip chart. And really, I want to emphasize, Michael, it's important not to skip any of the pages on.
Better believe it.
Yeah. Even if they already told you before, oh yeah, I don't have any coverage, re-emphasize, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I know you told me, you don't have any coverage. You're worried about leaving that financial bill. Let them repeat it again. Okay. Yeah. So that is page number 3 of the flip chart. Now we're going to get into the guarantees. And it's real simple. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, these state regulated plans have 5 features necessary to secure a proper final expense plan. Number 1 is that we're going to make sure that we find you affordable premiums that are guaranteed never to increase, regardless of any changes to your health. So once you get locked in, Mrs. Smith, at your current age of 65, even if you make it to 95 or 100, you never have to worry about your plan increasing in cost, which I know is important to you. So you're basically reading it, and then maybe you're just kind of adding, ad-libbing and maybe adding a little bit of additional information to it. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, number 2, the death benefit is guaranteed never to decrease, regardless of any changes to your health. There are plans out there, unfortunately, that unscrupulous salespeople are selling that you think you're getting whole life coverage, but in reality, the plan decreases in value over time. This plan, you don't have to worry about it. Your 10,000 or 15,000, whatever you decide to go with, is going to be locked in for the rest of your life. Also, the death benefit is paid guaranteed income tax-free to your family, which means, when I deliver that check, and I think you said you wanted your sister Mary to be your beneficiary, when I bring that check for $10,000 to Mary, she doesn't have to worry about paying taxes on it. So again, what I'm doing is I'm tying in, I'm finding out like the beneficiary, like I knew who the beneficiary was going to be. So I'm going to use their name. If I didn't know, if I forgot to do that during my fact finding in the pre-sale folder, this is actually a time that you could answer that question. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with this coverage, it is tax-free to your family, to your beneficiary. Out of curiosity, if you decide, if we can find a program that meets your needs, who would you want to name as your beneficiary? I'd probably name my daughter or whoever. Okay, so her name is Mary. So when I bring Mary that check for 10,000, so you see what I'm doing, Michael? Like I'm personalizing it, and I'm adding a name, so she can visualize in her head. He's visualizing me bringing a check to her daughter or her husband or whoever. And it makes it a little bit more personalized, and it makes it so they're actually almost taking ownership of the policy before we even get them qualified.
That's powerful. Yeah, the more personal you can make your presentation, ladies and gentlemen, the more powerful to be, because you're never ever selling the product. No, people very rarely buy products and companies. They buy people, and that's what we're doing here. Building that relation and making that emotional connection is so crucial to write business today.
Yeah, and that's what you're doing. You're making that emotional connection. Number 4 is that it's guaranteed never to be canceled due to any changes to your age or health, unlike other plans. So and this is where I'll bring in like the AARP. Just as an example, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, AARP, I know they have a final expense policy. Unfortunately, it's not a whole life policy like this. It's a term policy, so it does expire. And I think, is it age 80 or 85?
It's age 80, which, is the average lifespan. So, isn't it funny, Mr. Customer, they're going to drop you right at the average lifespan. And like Jimmy always said, people get mad a lot of times, and he lets them get mad because they can kind of see right through the smoke screen. Hey, average lifespan is of 80, and they're dropping me at age 80.
Yeah, right when you're going to need it, they're dropping you.
Yes, you got it.
And lastly, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, these plans have guaranteed cash value, which accumulates over time that can be used for emergencies or other financial needs. And then you see at the bottom of the screen there, bottom of the flip chart, it says no medical exams. So, and best of all, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, there's no medical exams. In fact, that's why they send me out as a state licensed field underwriter. Once we're done here, I'm just simply going to ask you some simple health questions to determine which plan is going to be the best fit for you and offer you the biggest discounts. So you're expanding on that. Now, exploring options for final expense. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, when it comes right down to it, there's only 3 ways for final expenses and funeral plans to be covered. One is to do nothing. And that's really not an option, but unfortunately, that's what some people do, is that they just never make a decision and they keep procrastinating, and then they end up passing away, and they end up leaving that financial bill, that financial burden to their family, which I know you don't want to do. Now, if I'll just add this in as a caveat. If I'm sitting with a client that has procrastinated. They're 65 years old, and I've already determined they don't have any coverage in place. I'm going to call them out on it, Michael.
You better believe you got to be politely assertive.
So what I will say in that case, option number one, which really isn't an option, but that's where you do nothing. And unfortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that's what you've done so far. You're 65 years old and you've kind of procrastinated a little bit and you haven't taken out a plan, which is not a great choice, because when you do pass away, you're leaving that financial burden to your family, which I know you guys you're good people, and I know you don't want to do that. So I'm kind of laying a little bit of a guilt trip on them, Number two is acquire a prepaid funeral plan. And this is where we really want to kind of expand on this and kind of get into it, because it's not a good option. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you could pretty much go to any funeral home and meet with a funeral director and do a prepaid funeral plan. And this is usually very costly. If they come up with a plan for, a full funeral and it's $10,000 as an example, which wouldn't include the plot, that would just be the funeral home charges, they're going to want you to write a check right there on the spot. And if you don't have a check, then they're going to have to put you on a payment plan, which is usually they're going to get it paid off somewhere between 5 to 7 years. So it's very expensive. It could be a couple $100 a month. Plus, you're going to have interest that's going to accumulate on there, which is going to add even more cost. The other kind of downside to a prepaid funeral, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, is that in most cases they're non-transferable. So you're locked into that one funeral home. So if you move or you decide, you don't like that funeral home, you do something else, or maybe you decide, hey, you know what? I don't even want a funeral. I just want maybe a cremation and a memory, a life of, what do they call that? Where you just do like a
memorial service or graveside service or memorial.
Yeah, a memorial service. You don't even really want a full. You can't get. There's no getting your money back. Okay, once you paid into it, if you stop paying on it, you don't get your money back. The other thing, kind of negative on this, it's kind of a downside, is that if you do pass away prematurely, if you're on a 7-year payment plan and you pass away 3, 4, 5 years into it, it's not paid off, your family still has to come up with the money to go ahead and pay the rest of it to cover the funeral. And to hedge their bets a little bit, what the funeral home is actually going to do is, in addition to selling you the prepaid funeral, they're actually going to try to sell you a life insurance policy to cover it. So in case you do pass away prematurely, you have life insurance to cover it. So you're really kind of paying twice. That's the reason why prepaid funerals are so expensive. Ultimately, what most clients are doing is that they're acquiring a final expense plan, which is ultimately really the best option. This is where you make affordable monthly premiums into a whole life policy. And in most cases, you have coverage immediately. So first day coverage. So even if you just made one premium payment and you passed away prematurely, that full 10,000 or 15,000, whatever you decide to go with, that full death benefit is available immediately to your family. And in some cases, worst case scenario, maybe some plans have a 2-year wait that you have to pay into it for 2 years, but that's the worst case scenario on those types of plans. The other thing too, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with a final expense plan, it gives your family the freedom of choice. So you're not locked into one funeral home, and we can help you negotiate with different funeral homes in the area to make sure that we get you the best value possible. But Mike, you tell me, which of these 3 options, which of these makes the most amount of sense to you?
Normally, if you have explained that way, they're going to say, duh, the final expense plan. We've never had. Yeah,
everybody picked option number 3. Okay. Yeah. From there, you've really completed the, that's it for the final expense plan. For the final expense flip chart, that's the most crucial pages. Now, when you get a flip chart, there is going to be a last page if you want to use it. It's not required, but if you want to use it, you can. And that is explaining to the client. If you feel like you need to explain the application process, that's the reason why this last page is on here. And I recommend a lot of times for new agents maybe to use this page, because what I have found is that when clients understand the process, they're more likely to go with it. So if you explain what happens, so kind of the transition is once you, let's see, let me get to the right page. There we go. So once you've gone through this page and they say, well, yeah, I mean, obviously I think the final expense plan makes the most amount of sense. Great. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, let me just explain to you, you know, the application process. And one thing what some agents will do, Michael, is they'll actually do a takeaway. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, like I think I've explained this, but you know, you can't even purchase this coverage today, even if you wanted to. This is just the application process, and that's why they send out a state licensed field underwriter for me to ask the health questions. Let me just explain the process. One is I'm simply just going to ask you a few health questions. This is going to help me determine which program is going to offer you the maximum discounts. Then I'm going to find the company that meets your needs and obviously meets your budget as well. We're going to complete the request for coverage, which is the application. Now, some of the programs do require phone interviews. So if there's a phone interview required, we'll just get on the phone real quick with the insurance company. We'll complete the phone interview. I'm going to submit your application to the carrier, and usually within 5 to 10 business days, we'll have a decision back from the insurance company, and they're either going to approve you, they're going to decline you, or in some cases, they're going to make a counter offer. From that point, you're just simply going to receive your policy and accept the coverage. And the great thing is, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, is that we don't collect any premiums today. If you are approved, we'll coordinate your first premium with your Social Security, and then that's when your coverage will go into place. Now from here, I want to immediately transfer into asking the health questions, okay? So what I'll do from there, Michael, is what I will say once I complete this page. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I know this may seem like a silly question, but I am required to ask it. Do either of you, are you currently hospitalized or are you residing in a nursing home? And they're, you know, well, of course not. I know, but I am required to ask. So answer no to that question. And what physically I have out is I have an application out that I'm taking that I'm kind of going through those health questions. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, do either of you require oxygen to assist with breathing? So I'm going to kind of go through some of the knockout questions, and I'm going to transition into some of the deeper questions to get them qualified. So then I can transition into my not flip chart, but my 3-option close presentation. So with that, guys, I mean that's the whole you know, soup and nuts of the flip chart presentation. And the one point I want to make, the reason why it's so important to learn that in-home presentation so well, where you can just rattle it off in your sleep, because of regardless of whether you're doing in-home presentation or you're doing selling over the phone, once you know that flip chart, because the sales process for over the phone, if you're doing telesales, is really kind of similar. You know, so as you're doing your presentation over the phone, you know, you're able to go through kind of that flip chart without having a flip chart. It's very powerful to be able to do that. It's also very powerful to be able to do this flip chart presentation seamlessly in the home, so you're making that connection and it doesn't seem like you're doing a canned type of presentation. Because you really want to be able to engage as you're doing the flip chart. You want to be able to ask those questions and really get your client engaged. And that's one of the reasons why, Michael, I like the paper flip chart, the little binder, because it just seems more, it doesn't like using the tablet just seems kind of sterile, like you're just
Yes.
kind of going through it. And old people like, I mean, they like paper, you know, they like being able to put it makes it tangible. It makes it so they can actually put their hands on it. And if it's in writing and you have it and they can see it, then it must be true.
Yep.
Hopefully, I'll let you kind of expand on that, Michael. I'm just going to see if we have any questions. Guys, if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to add to today's call, raise your hand or ask the question, and I'll get your answer. Michael, let me turn it over to you real quick. I'll see if we have any questions.
Joe, you know I can get a little long-winded, but when it comes to the presentation, ladies and gentlemen, Joe and I can talk for 8 hours, because life and business, as well as in life itself, is all about presentation and the way you present yourself. As the client is never ever buying the product on the front end. No, they're first and foremost buying you, and it's all about the way you present yourself. And our number one goal in giving our presentation is to educate our clients. You know, Joe, we're never known as salespeople. We're always known as professional educators, professional explainers, and professional question answers. And our whole presentation has been set up to be educationally driven, and to take the guesswork out of this for you guys. You know, Joe Johnson, ladies and gentlemen, has already made all the mistakes. He's already fallen into all the pitfalls. Went down all the wrong way streets over his last many years in this business. And he's designed this presentation so you do not have to make those mistakes. And Joe, just piggybacking off what you said earlier, it is so important that every agent on this phone understand that you need to give this presentation completely each and every time. A good friend of ours and my mentor, Tim Winders, you know, Joe always said, giving the presentation completely each and every time was like baking a really good cake. You know, if someone asked me, Joe, to bake a cake, I'd say, really? I'm not a chef, but if they want me to bake it, I'd get a recipe card, Joe, and I would follow that recipe card to a T. I wouldn't leave the eggs out, but I also wouldn't add in Tabasco sauce, or that cake just wouldn't taste the same. It's the same thing with the Senior Solutions in-home presentation. You don't want to leave anything out, or you don't want to add anything in, or you're not going to get that same result, which is making that crucial emotional connection with your prospect needed to create the urgency for them to make a decision today. So Joe did a phenomenal job on explaining the presentation today. You know, I'll sort of wrap it up with this. You know, every presentation usually has 3 objectives. You know, first of all, to deliver your message, the final expense message. Number 2, to protect you, the agent's most valuable resource, your time. And then number 3, to handle objections up front, and so at the end of the presentation with both stakes and emotions run high. And that's why, Jimmy, I've heard both you and Jimmy say over and over, Joe, that when you give the presentation completely each and every time, many times you get to the close and there's absolutely no objections, simply because you already handled them up front. So again, Joe, could go all day long on this right here, but I'm just excited about the way you explained it, and just really want to stress to everybody, you know, life and business success in both is all about presentation, because believe you me, they're buying you. They're not buying Transamerica or Mutual of Omaha. They're buying, first and foremost, they're buying you. And the way you buy you is by the way you present yourself. And it's just all laid out here, almost like a business in a box, the Senior Solutions in-home presentation.
Yeah.
Back over to you, Jeff.
All right, man. Well, everybody, a little bit shorter call today. We just had that one subject. Again, I'll get this on YouTube. I will put the the full in-home presentation A to Z. I'll drop it in the description of this call. But appreciate everybody hopping on. And if you need help over the weekend, I'm available. Shoot me a text, give me a call, and we'll help you work through your cases. Just remember, when you're out there, regardless if you're selling over the phone, if you have an opportunity to do a telesell, or if you're face-to-face, just remember, man, do not take shortcuts when it comes to the in-home presentation. Do all the steps. It makes all the difference in the world. All right, everybody, God bless. Have a great weekend. All right, Michael, I know you wanted to talk. I'll give you a call in a minute, buddy.
God bless everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.